So I just watched Batman Return of the Caped Crusader, and I honestly have no idea how to review this type of movie. Batman Return of the Caped Crusader is essentially an animated continuation of the 60s TV show. They have Adam West returning, Burt Ward, Julie Newmar, and it has the tone, the vibe, the sense of humor, the plotting, the plot devices of the 1960s Batman TV show, and they also did a movie out of that. That's essentially what this is, except with it being animated, there's a few things they can do now that they couldn't do before, but it plays out very similar to the way that show worked. But that's what makes it so difficult to review, because Adam West is 88 years old, Burt Ward is 71, Julie Newmar is 83, and they sound like it. And so it's this very peculiar piece of history, because only they could voice these people if they're alive, and that's what you get. So it's great to hear them back in these roles, and they still got the comedic timing, the bizarre sense of humor, the self-awareness of it, the ridiculous, over-the-top morality of it, the preaching to it. I mean, it has all of that, but it's like a throwback of what they were doing before, kind of like it's a fan film, but it's not a fan film. It's the real deal with the real people, but they're so old that they shouldn't be doing this anymore, so it kind of doesn't work, but it kind of works because it's such a bizarre thing that they're doing. All that to say, I guess I'm the target audience for this. Really, probably my sister's the primary target audience for this movie, but it's for people that loved it back in the day and still have a good sense of humor and understand what that show was. And I grew up watching the 60s Batman TV show and the movie all the time, and I've been actually showing the movie to my kids, and the Bat Shark Repellent and all that. They love that. But with all that said, I don't really know who this is for beyond just fans of the original 60s TV show. If that's all it's for, it accomplishes that well. It doesn't have ambitions beyond that. It doesn't try to transcend it, doesn't try to outdo it. It's just an animated version of that. And with that, it kind of feels a little bit like they maybe set out originally to make a series of these, and it was going to be like a bunch of 20-minute little bits, and then they were like, let's just make a movie out of it, and I hear they've already greenlit a sequel to it with William Shatner's Two-Face, and so that kind of falls into the way this felt to me, because it doesn't feel really like a movie. It feels very kind of like there's this episode of it, and then there's kind of the cliffhanger like in the show, and then there's the next part, and there's a cliffhanger, and there's the next part, and there's about 3 or 4 of those in here. But it doesn't have like this one big storyline. It's just a series of single storylines, and taking advantage that it's animated as opposed to live action. They couldn't do what they do in this movie if it had been live action. Back in the 60s, we could do it now, but you wouldn't do it now. So it's a very interesting mix of how they did it. So on the good side, there's just a charm to this innocent form of Batman that just kind of, it's a caricature of the good guy with the good character that always does the right thing. And they play into the humor of that, and they play into the over-the-top nature of that from the original stuff without being like really mocking the original or mocking anything like that. It's just having fun with the humor of the over-the-top nature of that. While the voice cast sounds ancient in this, there's just something very pure and fun about having them back in these roles that kind of defined their careers and gave us the version of Batman that was the definitive version for like 20 years, outside of the comics, obviously. And so there's just something fun to that. And just, having a Batman that's not dark and brooding at all and just going back to these good old days, there's something nice about that. I love my Batman dark and brooding. I don't have any problem with my Batman going dark and brooding. It's a character that fits nicely with that. This is a nice thing to exist that is counter to that. I love to have both of these Batmans. Without wanting to say too much, they also find a way to work in a whole bunch of the characters from the original show into this movie, and it was a lot of fun. I was like, that's who this is, that's who this is, that's who this is. And my wife's like, what are you talking about? It's like, did you not watch this show growing up? She's like, no, I didn't. So I got to inform her of who all these wacky characters are. On the bad side, I really felt myself kind of distracted and bored during it. Like, it didn't hold my attention. It was kind of like, okay, we're tracking along. And the novelty of it lasts about 20 minutes. And then there's kind of some changes of direction as the plot starts to get going. And it doesn't necessarily take it in a direction that I felt was compelling for me. I understand why they would do it. I understand if this was like a TV show and this was like episode 13 of the show, it would probably be a perfectly fine episode, and the third act would be a perfectly fine episode 14. But as it was, it's just a movie that's coming 50 years later. It's kind of like, this is the story we're going with. I mean, that's kind of a weird direction to go with this. Okay. It just wasn't very interesting to me. As I mentioned, the voice cast, they sound just as old as they actually are. And that is kind of if you're not just having nostalgia for these people coming back to play these characters, I would just imagine you'd watch it being like, oh, this is rough. Like, he does not sound good. And he's 88. I mean, he sounds like an 88-year-old man, and that's fine, but it's very awkward if you're not someone that just is drawn to this material naturally. So for this movie, I'm going to give it a couple of different ratings. I'm going to try and estimate it a little differently. If you're like me and you grew up watching the old 60s Batman show, not a huge fan. I don't go rewatch it on my own time often. I'm trying to show it to my kids a little bit, but beyond that, I don't really watch it. On that rating scale, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's worth checking out. The novelty of it is amusing enough for a single watch. It's just kind of barely a thumbs up for me. That is 6 out of 10. It's not great. I don't think I'm going to rewatch it. So if I'm being honest, it's just worth watching one time. If that's your situation. If you're someone that loves the original show, still watches it, you've got the Blu-ray sets, the whole deal, I'm going to bump that up to an 8 out of 10. This is probably going to give you what you want. It's more the same type of humor. It's more of what that show was, a continuation. So I think you're going to enjoy it even more so than really anyone else on the planet. And if you're not someone that grew up watching that 60s show, please tell me in the comment section, what did you think about this movie? Because I have no idea what you would make of this bizarre nostalgia piece in the year 2016 if you're not super familiar with the old 60s show. So seriously, tell me in the comment section if you loved the old series or if you've never seen it before, what did you think about it? This is such an interesting movie to exist. I'm so glad it does exist, while at the same time being, I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but I'm so glad it actually does exist. Hey, buddy. Hey, real quick, what did you think of the Batman cartoon last night?
Cool, and I like the Batman. And thank you for watching. Now your turn.